My boyfriend of 3 years broke up with me because I made a joke. A joke? Okay, Reddit, I seriously need you to tell me if I'm losing my mind. My boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend now, I guess, Elias just blew up our entire 3-year relationship. The reason? A joke. I'm not even kidding. One stupid, harmless little joke. Look, he's always been what you'd call sensitive. Super sensitive. But this is insane. So honestly, am I the asshole here, or did men just completely forget how to take a fucking joke? Because right now, I just feel like I'm going crazy trying to understand what even happened. Let me give you some context, because I know how that sounds. When I met Elias, he was like a breath of fresh air. I work in corporate finance. My whole world is a shark tank of sharp suits, sharper tongues, and people who are so polished they practically reflect your own bullshit back at you. It's all networking, posturing, and pretending to care about golf. Elias wasn't that. He was a carpenter, he worked with his hands, and he was from this tiny town in the middle of nowhere. He was just genuine, and honestly I found that so attractive. He was my escape from that world, and he had this accent. God, this thick, syrupy country accent that dragged out all his vowels. In the beginning, I honestly thought it was the most adorable thing in the world. It felt authentic, you know? It was this charming quirk that made him different from every other guy named Chad in a tailored suit. I'd make him say words like pecan or caramel just to hear them stretch out in that slow, rural way. He'd always just laugh and shake his head, a little embarrassed but smiling, like he was in on the joke. He was a good sport about it, or so I thought. But here's the thing, the part I guess I'm supposed to see as some big fucking warning sign. We were in bed one night, maybe 6 months in, just talking after we'd gotten back from a work dinner of mine where he'd been awkwardly quiet the whole time. He got this really quiet look on his face, tracing patterns on the comforter, and told me that the accent, the one I thought was so cute, was his personal hell growing up. Kids in his school were relentless. They'd mimic him, call him a dumb hick, and ask him to repeat words over and over just so they could laugh. He said he spent most of his teenage years trying to practice it away, watching news anchors and trying to sound smarter. He looked at me, his eyes all serious, and said, "It just always made me feel small." And what did I do? I think I kissed his forehead or something. I gave him a squeeze and told him, "Babe, that's in the past. They were just stupid kids. You're with me now, nobody thinks that." I genuinely thought it was a sweet, vulnerable moment. A little piece of his past he was sharing with me. I didn't realize I was being handed a goddamn instruction manual on how to emotionally detonate this man. My brain filed it away under Elias' cute, sad backstory and moved on. I probably changed the subject 5 minutes later. I just didn't get it. I didn't get the weight of it. So the jokes started small. I swear they were harmless at first. It would just be between us in the safety of our apartment. If he mispronounced a word or used one of his countryisms, I'd playfully mimic him. "Oh, you're fixin' to go to the store, are ya?" I'd say, putting on an exaggerated twang. He'd roll his eyes, but he'd smile, a little one. It was our thing. It felt like teasing, the kind of gentle ribbing couples do. I saw it as a sign of our intimacy, that I could poke at this little part of him and it was safe. Then I took the show on the road. The first time was at a brunch with my work friends, one of those places where they charge you $20 for avocado toast. Elias was telling a story about fixing a fence back home, something about T-posts and wire stretchers, and I could see my friend's eyes starting to glaze over. I felt this hot wave of secondhand embarrassment, this need to manage the situation. So I jumped in, trying to be the fun, charismatic host. Okay, let me translate from the original hillbilly," I announced, holding up my hands. The table erupted in laughter. It was a huge hit, and it felt good. It was like a drug. I was funny, I was witty, I was the one in charge. I looked over at Elias, expecting him to be laughing along. But he wasn't. His shoulders tensed up. He put his fork down with this very deliberate, quiet click. The light just went out of his eyes. This became the pattern. I'd do the Elias translation service at gatherings, and he would just disappear. Not physically, but his spirit would just leave the room. He'd get incredibly quiet, and I'd have to carry the social load for the both of us. It was infuriating. How was I supposed to know it was a big deal if he never said anything? He wouldn't fight. He'd just give me the silent treatment, this passive-aggressive bullshit that made me feel like I was going crazy. Since his silence was his weapon, my words became mine. I thought if I just pushed a little harder, he'd finally break. He'd finally yell, cry, something. We were at a fancy restaurant for my boss's birthday, and Elias was staring at the menu like it was written in another language. He quietly asked me what foie gras was. Instead of just telling him, I laughed, a little too loudly. "Oh, honey," I said, patting his hand. "Don't worry, it's not deep-fried squirrel." The whole table heard. My boss, a man I'd been trying to impress for months, thought it was hilarious. Elias didn't look at the menu again, he just ordered the same thing I did. His voice was completely flat. It felt like I was constantly apologizing for him, for his background, for the fact that he wasn't like everyone else. The jokes were my way of controlling the narrative, of saying, "I know he's different, but isn't it funny?" Instead of letting people think, "What is she doing with him?" On the car ride home after that dinner, the silence was so thick I felt like I was suffocating. "Why do you always do that?" I finally snapped. "You make things so awkward. Can't you just be normal for one night? You're embarrassing me." And he'd just stare out the window, not a single word. His silence was a wall, and God, I just wanted to smash it. It felt like he was judging me, judging my life, my friends, and I hated him for it. Then came the trip to his hometown. This was the first time I was going to meet his mom, and honestly, I was dreading it. I had this whole narrative built up in my head, a sort of tragic chic backstory for my diamond-in-the-rough boyfriend. I pictured a rundown house, peeling paint, maybe a few rusted cars in the yard. But it wasn't like that at all. It was a small, neat house with a porch swing and flowers in the garden. It was wholesome. And his mom, Helen, was lovely. A genuinely sweet, warm woman with a kind smile and Elias' eyes. She hugged me the second I got out of the car and told me how excited she was to finally meet the woman who made her son so happy. The whole time, she was just fussing over us, making sure we were comfortable, offering us iced tea and homemade cookies. It was almost painfully normal. Dinner was nice. It was simple, just some roast chicken and vegetables from her garden, but it was delicious. Helen kept telling me stories about Elias as a little boy, how he'd always be taking things apart and putting them back together, how he was always so serious and thoughtful. Elias was more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. He was laughing, his accent thicker and more natural here, and he looked happy. He and his mom were chatting back and forth, slipping into that easy rhythm only family has. They were talking about a neighbor, and Elias said something, a full sentence steeped in that deep, rural sound. And then I did it. I don't even know why. Maybe I felt left out of their bubble. Maybe the quiet simplicity of it all was getting on my nerves. It was like an addiction, that little jolt of laughter I got from being the witty one. I saw an opening and I just took it. I leaned forward, putting my hand on Helen's arm as if we were sharing a secret. I turned to her, put on my brightest, most patronizing smile, and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Isn't he just the cutest? Honestly, Helen, half the time I have no idea what he's saying. It's like he's speaking his own little language. You must have needed a special decoder ring when he was growing up." The silence that followed was nothing like the silent treatments in the car. This was a dead, heavy, absolute void. The clinking of cutlery stopped. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to roar. Helen's warm smile just froze on her face. It didn't fall, it just froze. Her eyes flickered from me to Elias, a look of pure confusion and hurt washing over her features. She looked at her son, the boy she'd raised, and saw him through my eyes for the first time. As a joke, and Elias, God, I've never seen a person lose all their color so fast. He went white. Not pale, but a stark, sickly white, like all the blood had just drained out of him. He didn't look at me. He just stared down at his plate of half-eaten chicken, his hands perfectly still on the table. He didn't say a word. He just sat there, hollowed out, in the ruins of the perfect little evening I had just nuked from orbit. The rest of the dinner was a masterclass in pretending. Helen asked me a few polite, stilted questions about my job. Elias didn't say another word unless he was spoken to, and even then, his answers were just one-word murmurs. The warmth was gone, replaced by a brittle, awkward chill. I tried to overcompensate, being extra bubbly and complimentary about the food, but my laughter just sounded loud and stupid in the quiet room. The drive back to our apartment was the worst silence yet. It was 3 hours of absolutely nothing. No radio, no small talk, just the hum of the tires on the highway. I kept glancing over at him. He was just a statue, his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. I tried to break the tension. "So," I said, trying for a light tone. "Your mom, she's a little serious, huh? Guess she doesn't really get my sense of humor." He didn't even turn his head. Nothing. The comment just hung in the air and died. When we finally pulled into our parking garage, he turned off the engine, and the silence became even more profound. He just sat there, staring ahead. "Okay, what is your problem?" I finally snapped, my voice echoing in the concrete space. "Are you going to give me the silent treatment all night because of one little comment?" He finally turned to look at me, and his face was completely blank. All the love, the annoyance, the frustration, everything that was usually there was just gone. It was like looking at a stranger. "Kiana," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any accent, as if he was making a conscious effort to erase every trace of where he came from. "We're done." I actually laughed. "Done? What are you talking about? Don't be so dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," he said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. "It's over." He pulled out his phone. I watched, completely stunned, as he opened his contacts, found my name, and hit block. Then he opened Instagram, block, Facebook, block. He did it with a methodical, detached precision. No anger, no tears, just a quiet, efficient amputation. "I'll get my things when you're at work this week," he said, and then he got out of the car, leaving me alone in the dark. For the next 2 days, I was a wreck. A mess of pure, undiluted rage. How dare he just throw away 3 years like that? Over nothing. I called him 100 times, the calls going straight to a dead tone. I sent him a novel's worth of furious, rambling texts that I knew would never deliver. I was pacing my apartment, half crying, half screaming at the empty space where he was supposed to be. Finally, I called Ava. She's our mutual friend, the one who introduced us. I knew she would be on my side. I launched into the story, making sure to frame it perfectly. I painted Elias as this moody, overly sensitive man-child and myself as the long-suffering, funny girlfriend who just made one tiny misstep. I told her about the joke, about his mom's reaction, about the silent car ride and the cold, brutal way he cut me off. I was expecting sympathy, a chorus of "he's crazy" and "you're better off without him." But when I finished, there was just silence on the other end of the line. For a good 10 seconds, "Ava," I said, my voice sharp, "are you there?" "Yeah," she said, and her voice was weirdly cautious. "I'm here." "So, can you believe him?" The absolute nerve. There was another pause. Then she sighed, a heavy, tired sound. "Kiana, listen to me. I love you, you know that. But what you did was fucked up." I felt a cold shock go through me. "What? It was a joke." "No, it wasn't," she said, and her voice was firm now, losing its cautious edge. "A joke is when everyone is laughing. You've been making Elias the punchline for years, and we've all seen it. We've all watched him shrink every time you do it. We didn't know how to tell you to stop." I started to argue, my voice rising, but she cut me off. "You didn't just make a joke, Kiana. You did it in his home, in front of his mother. You took the one thing he ever told you he was insecure about, the very thing bullies used against him his whole childhood, and you served it up for laughs at his family's dinner table. That's not a joke, that's just cruel. You weren't teasing him, you were humiliating him." Ava's words didn't sink in, not really. I hung up on her furious. She was supposed to be my friend. Instead, she took his side. It was a betrayal. For the next few days, I stewed in this righteous anger, telling myself they were both crazy. Him for being a baby, her for enabling him. I went to work, I went out for drinks, I posted pictures on Instagram with captions like "on to bigger and better things." I was performing my own survival, trying to convince the world and myself that I was fine. More than fine, I was thriving. Then, on Saturday, I came home to an apartment that felt hollow. He had come and gone like a ghost. His clothes were gone from the closet, his toothbrush from the bathroom, his worn-out work boots from by the door. He'd taken everything that was his. I walked through the rooms, a knot tightening in my stomach. It was all so clean, so final, and then I saw it. In the corner of the living room was the coffee table he'd been building for us. He was so proud of it, working on it every weekend for the past month, the whole apartment smelling like sawdust and wood stain. It was his passion project. It was almost finished, just needed a final coat of varnish. Tucked under one of the legs was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a note for me. It was a page torn from a notepad, one of his design sketches. There were measurements and angles scrawled in his messy handwriting, and in the bottom corner, he'd written a little note to himself. Final coat walnut stain, for Kiana's surprise. So here I am, sitting on the floor of my too-quiet apartment, writing this all out. My friends think I'm a monster. The man I loved is gone, and I keep telling myself it's for the best, that I'm free from his hypersensitive bullshit. I should be relieved to be rid of him, right? I should be celebrating. But I just keep staring at this unfinished table, and all I can think about is what color he was going to paint it.